Hello and welcome to the Record Players Podcast. Objectively the best opinion in music. Today we're going to be looking at Silk Sonic, an evening with Silk Sonic, with Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak. Let's get into it. Okay, so this project has been getting teased since March-ish. That's when the first single was released, but it's from looking at interviews with Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak. This has been in the works for a number of years. It's been fairly anticipated. We've been looking forward to it. I know we were fairly hyped when we first got the initial single, Leave the Door Open. So, Hadi, do you think it lived up to the hype?
Oh yeah, I think it did. I wish they hadn't left it so long from the release of that single, because it was in March that it came out. Is that what you're saying? That first single. I guess it's more the rollout than my own personal enjoyment, but I wish they just kind of hit with a few bangers and then dropped that shit by the summer. I feel like it would have maybe had a better effect. But yeah, overall I fucked with it, man. I mean, I wouldn't say it does anything like new. It's not something you haven't heard before, but I think they were like almost like playing musical characters, but the synergy was there, the chemistry between them was there, and yeah, it just sounded so like crisp throughout. So yeah, I fucked with it.
Yeah, the production sounds very good, and the fact that they predominantly used live instrumentation was a breath of fresh air. But yeah, I think they waited way too long to drop it. I almost forgot about this album.
Yeah, I don't know what the story was, because there was a few other singles that came out, right?
Yeah, throughout.
But yeah, big time delay.
Drip fed. Jack, do you think it lived up to the hype?
No.
No, not at all.
I think it's a really interesting project. It was a really interesting concept, and that first track was certified banger. I was really excited for the album to come out, but I think that locking themselves into that particular style was really, really good for their voices and their styles anyway. But they also locked themselves into all of the traps of those genres, and they had the opportunity to kind of break out of that with the fact that music has moved on. They're both absolute global superstars with a load of money and studios to help them make something really kind of like a new take on that style, but they never really went into that area. They just kind of stayed where that style of music has gone before, which was a little disappointing.
Yeah, it does feel like a kind of tribute or an homage album to people they would have grown up on. I heard obviously Stevie, Marvin Gaye, James Brown, Michael Jackson and Prince. I heard all of those artists kind of songs kind of aping their style. So yeah, it definitely felt like a kind of these are the guys we grew up on and want to pay respect type thing.
Yeah, it sounded like a tribute to R&B, funk and soul to me. Just a modern tribute to that. So what pitfalls, how do you think it fell short? What pitfalls, Jack, do you think they fell into? Because I'm not the biggest R&B, funk and soul fan.
Yeah,
I should say.
Well, I for me it had elements of all of those different genres, but what I would describe it as being the closest to would actually be Motown. So whereas stuff like the funk and soul has very, very heavy moments and very specific elements that you focus on, for funk it's all about that rhythm section, and you have your horns providing support for that, and then melodic little licks and things going on. There were elements of that in here, but it never committed to a proper, and they had I can't remember which track it was on, but they had maybe 777. They had quite a nice funky guitar thing going on. But if it was a James Brown track, that at some point during that song they would have stripped everything back and just had that core element and built it back up from the pocket to the full track. that sort of showmanship element of funk wasn't really there for me. It's much more like the kind of Motown stuff that was produced to sell and was like made to be palatable. And like, I love Motown, don't get me wrong, but like it fell short of Motown for me as well, because Motown spent so much time making sure that all of their records were exactly on point. They all had interesting things happening all the time. This for me falls into the modern trap a little bit of having things that are able to be copied and pasted. And yeah, you might do a different vocal harmony on top of it the second time, but if it's reusing that same material, for me it was still a bit like, oh, I've heard this before, why would I listen again?
Right. Am I right in thinking that a lot of those Motown hits were properly composed by, properly qualified composers?
In-house composers working on different artists' tracks, giving them to it, and then
I was going to say, I just love the terminology like you use there, Dennis. They're like properly qualified composers. Like I just imagine like a composer just goes, he's on like a graduation day, and he gets his certificate. It's like composer. It's like,
you're officially a composer today. Go out into the world.
Yeah, I'm ready
for one of the 4 studios.
Yeah. And he's got like graduation robes, but there's like purple stars all over them.
Yeah, right. A proper Bootsy Collins like robe.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
and like George Clinton hands in the fucking thing.
Yeah. So let's go back to the time that it's taken for the album to come out. This album is half an hour long for an album that's been in the works for the better part of a year. Like, Hattie, did you expect this to be longer? Because I was surprised that it was only half an hour long.
I'm not mad at that. I love a small album. I know I saw some rumblings online. People are a bit annoyed that they dropped like singles and then half the album was already out there. But I'm perfectly happy with a short and sweet listen. I mean, because it doesn't necessarily do anything new. It just kind of rehashes a sound, which I thought was, I still think is quite good, and it's cool to listen to. I feel like it could have overstayed its welcome by being much longer. So, maybe there could have been 1 or 2 more tracks, but unless they're deviating the sound even more, it's perfectly fine being a quick, short and sweet one. And here's the other thing: when you look at a lot of like older music in that lane, yeah, you could have the kind of experimental stuff that focuses more on the musicianship, but a lot of times the songs were short and sweet. When you look at soul funk, yeah, I mean, it definitely kind of feels like an album full of singles, but or like, yeah, you could say like radio edits, whatever. But yeah, I think that's on brand too.
Yeah. Would you say this is similar to the Mr. Bungle album that was sort of like a tribute to thrash, but more with the funk and soul side, where it took the elements of it without actually being in that era? So it doesn't have the proper spirit of being in that era, but it's taking sort of the caricatures, the stereotypes, and just putting it out there.
I feel like they were both very like on type with the genres, like very much an exact replication of that. Maybe like a more like modern production sound where everything's a bit more crisper due to the technology. But the musical content I found on both the albums was pretty much like that genre. While, say for example, you compare something like the Saint Vincent album that was also very 70s focused, but that did a few different things that leaned more modern. That was an example of taking an old sound for me, but like modernizing it compositionally that you don't necessarily have on here. This is more straight laced, I guess.
Yeah, I think that was one of the most disappointing parts of the album, in my opinion. It was like, I'm not mad at the length of it, because the material is so similar, like as a whole. The tracks that do sound different really stand out, because a lot of the time it's in exactly the same space as it was, and if they were going to extend it, they would need to make something that is unique sounding compared to the rest of the album to make it worth extending, or just leave it the length that it is. But yeah, and a year, I can also appreciate, like, from the point of view of musicians coming together for the first time, and then like making, you know, a new sound, or like transitioning into a new sound for them to perform. That takes time in itself. So like having a track and having an album are very, very different. You need to like, you could I can make a funk track now, like throwing in all the tricks that I know about funk. But if I was to make a full album, I'd have to go and research and practice new stuff and like really dive into it to stop it sounding super bland by track 3. So I can appreciate like there was more work than just making an album going into this. But yeah, a year for half an hour is a bit kind of iffy when the content is so similar.
You know, they also say that the sound that they were going for, I saw this on a interview that they did with Apple Music, that the sound that they were going for was like a live performance, as if like this is like a show, but in the form of an album. So yeah, it kind of makes sense that they'd want to get it tight.
Yeah.
And you kind of had that. You had Bootsy Collins like hosting, like interjecting kind of every kind of couple of tracks, kind of gave that vibe, that kind of thematic or like, you know, one show from front to back. I got that feeling, definitely.
Yeah, like you could imagine like, yeah, this would be like a set list, and then afterwards there'd be like an encore where they'd play their own personal hits or something. So what about the performances, the actual performances on the album, Jack? So as I was listening to it, I found it hard to distinguish between Bruno Mars and Anderson .Paak. They sounded really, really similar.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
to
a
my
hot take.
ears.
I can see where you're coming from. They're like, their vocal tonality it's definitely like a Venn diagram where you can draw the area that they share in the middle.
Yeah. As well as that, Bruno Mars was the producer
with both. Yeah, I would have to disagree with both of you on that.
You don't think there's a shared area between their voices? What?
No.
Man, you're
if
crazy.
I didn't have Genius multiple times, I wouldn't know who was actually singing on multiple songs.
No, I think they're two very different singers and have very different like vocal approaches.
Very different. Not very different.
You could have to divine very. But I mean to the extent at which I was never confused who was singing, but that was just me.
I've listened to both artists a fair amount. If when I was listening to this, just like walk into the shops and I wasn't fully paying attention, I could have a second of being like, oh, who is this? And like taking me a second to come over. But I could I think one of the reasons that this album works in the areas where it does is because they've got that like middle ground that they're both comfortable in. I think they're like, yeah, I don't understand saying they're like completely separated vocally.
Okay, well, look, I'm not talking to the extent at which you get like a fucking, I don't know, black metal
Prince
vocalist.
And Barry White.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, like I'm not talking like black metal vocalist and like a gospel singer. I'm not talking about that different, but I'm talking about within like the space of two guys that do R&B soul music.
Yeah.
I don't know, and I thought it was something that was good, and I thought they played to their strengths as well. Obviously, Bruno has the more like wider range and a more traditionally like perfect or technical voice, you would say, and I found like whenever they wanted a section where they were going to go off vocally, that's where he would take the lead, and then when they wanted a bit more like swagger, like Anderson .Paak would do his kind of like singy rap kind of thing. And I thought they had a good contrast. It was one of the things I liked the most about the album.
Yeah, no, I thought they worked that well as well. Yeah, I thought that was good. They definitely you could tell there wasn't a huge amount of ego running behind this project. It was definitely like something trying to make something like outside of themselves that was existing of its own right, rather than like, oh,
they're not trying to one up each
project other. We're gonna do it.
Yeah.
How good?
It's a vibe. It's a vibe as well. Like you can feel like a vibe running through it.
Yeah.
It's not so much like an egotistical project. What were your top 3 tracks? So I was more geared towards the more upbeat songs, but I know I sort of distinguished that there were sort of upbeat, up tempo songs, sort of down tempo, sort of relaxed love songs, some songs that you could be called breakup songs. So Jack, give us your top three.
Sure, yeah. I think if you don't pick Leave the Door Open as one of your top three, you're an absolute crack smoker. So obviously that's there. I think, you know, as it's the track that built all the hype for the album, rightly so. It's a fantastic track. Probably the best track on the album still. Now I've heard it all. It's almost disappointing to have heard that so long ago and then now heard so many similar things that didn't hit exactly the same high, but it, you know, it's such a high point to try and reach. Yeah, I'm not gonna to hold them up for that. Fly As Me again, early on in the album was another kind of high point for me. I was still riding the high of Leave the Door when I first heard it, and after listening to Fly As Me, I was ready for the rest of this album. I think it's more, it's, you know, it's like a more faster upbeat track, like you were talking about, Dennis, but it's more towards the kind of Anderson .Paak end of things than the Bruno
100%.
Mars end of things. Yeah, it could have very much come from a track that hasn't made it onto one of his last albums, I feel, and then been adapted for this. But yeah, sells the vibe perfectly. And the last one I'm going to go for is Skate. So towards the end, this is where I thought they nailed that Motown sound for me, because they actually kind of used the instrumentation for more than harmonic accompaniment for their voices, which I found was like sometimes lacking on some of the tracks. It's particularly in the middle. They use the guitar as like the kind of accompaniment focus in the verse. They use the vocal harmonies in the pre-chorus. They use the strings in the chorus. Like, the actual instrumentation of this track is miles beyond what some of the other tracks do, even though, like, mix wise the instrumentation is always really nice and like the levels of stuff is good, you can hear stuff with clarity. Here you can tell that it's gone all the way back to the composition level, where they've thought about, okay, how are we going to trade it off between these different characteristic instruments, how are we going to make them blend with the vocals. Yeah, and this track that helps keep it fresh all the way through.
Cool. Harry, go for it.
Very similar. So yeah, Leave the Door Open, because contrary to popular belief, I don't smoke crack. So yeah, that's arguably the track of the album, and definitely going to be on my year-end list when we do that video.
Getting close to that.
Yeah, crazy how time flies. And yeah, again, agree with Jack. Fly As Me, great follow-up. Loved the kind of semi kind of raps that Paak was doing, and I shared a sentiment that it definitely could have been something off one of his albums. Great chorus as well, great horns and vocal harmonies on that song to contrast with like the kind of stripped back verse. And then my third favorite was probably the closer, Blast Off. I thought it was a really good finish, and probably like the most different sounding track. Or if, we raised the criticism maybe that it was too much of an emulation album, an emulation of a sound. I thought the final track, while it wasn't necessarily something new, it definitely kind of went into a different space, almost kind of like psychedelic, dreamy territory, which is good. It just stood out on the album, I thought, by being a bit different than a kind of more traditional funk and soul that was on the rest.
Surprised you chose Blast Off. I'm surprised you chose Blast Off. That didn't stick out to me at all. That was a track to forget for me.
Yeah, I mean, each their own. I mean, I didn't raise it, but like Skate, I thought was probably the weakest track, just coming off Jack's list there. So yeah, that one for me, it was just a bit too. That was probably like the most standard track, as in it had, for me, I felt like there was nothing that kind of stood out and did anything different, and I really didn't fuck with a hook on that one.
I think Smoking Out the Window is by far the most vanilla track on this album. I have no idea. Brace yourselves. Why it has 50 million plays on Spotify. It's so bland.
Nah, I mean there are a few. I do like quite a few things on that song, but on the line alone where they're like, what is it? Paak's like, not to be dramatic, but I want to die, and he sings it with so much sincerity, and then Bruno's like, this bitch got me, dude. That was because that bit was so jamming.
Because they've made a vibey, 60s to 80s album, like depending on which track it is. It's vibey, it's chilled, and then he's coming out of here nowhere with the only fucking bitch on the album. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's so prominent, it just completely killed the vibe.
The music cuts out.
Yeah,
but see,
I would appreciate it on a different album.
Yeah.
But in this context, it killed it for me, and
it comes off as odd given the like context or how the album's trying to like sound. But I like that. I thought it was like a bit where you're a bit like. Every time I heard it, I was a bit like, like a bit like thrown back. But I like that kind of like tension or surprise.
If there was more of that on the track, I think it could be really, really strong. But it goes from that to a super like middle ground chorus where like nothing kind of happens for me.
See, that was my vibe for Skate.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, my top three, I'm not going to say Leave the Door Open just because I've heard it way too many times now, to be honest. So I'll try and appreciate some of the other tracks on the album. So I'm with Jack with Fly As Me. That was such a groovy track, and Anderson .Paak's rapping went so well with the groove on the track. Skate, I like the vibe in general. Again, I'm with you, Harry, to be honest with you. The hook is a bit weak, but it's a great vibe in general. And Silk Sonic Intro, just because I love Anderson .Paak's drumming in that. Anderson .Paak's drumming throughout is amazing, and that's partly why I liked Skate as well. Yeah, the instrumentation on Skate is amazing. I think it starts with some bongos. If you listen like in the background, there's some bongos going, which gives me very much a Curtis Mayfield vibe.
Yeah. Love Curtis Mayfield.
Yeah. So again, it's just one of those more artists that they're trying to squeeze into this album as well. One thing I thought we'd notice is I had mentioned as well is this is on Dr. Dre's Aftermath record label, and of course Dr. Dre, famous for G-Funk. Of course, he's massively influenced by the music that this era's sound is. That 60s, 70s R&B, funk and soul. That's all over his production and his records.
I mean, half of the Chronic samples were like funkadelic songs alone, right?
Yeah, exactly. Rolling in my 6-4. Bow, bow, bow. Good times. Cool. So let's put this on our board of GOAT to trash. GOAT being the greatest of all time, up from fire, down all the way to trash. Harry, where would you put this?
All right, I'm wary that you guys are going to be, reacting negatively. But to me,
this is going to be an interesting one.
Okay, let me preface this by saying it's a low, but it is, for me, it is a fire. I fucked with this. I listened to it like many times, and will continue to listen to it again because it's a nice, short and sweet package. Again, it suffers from like not doing anything really new, and it can be a bit too like sugary at times. But I love the performances, and it's just like a great like easy listen, kind of no matter what the vibe is.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, because I'm not the biggest R&B funk soul fan. I think it's all right. I appreciate it as like a form of music, but it's not something that I go to. I have a handful of R&B funk and soul albums, like the hits, D'Angelo, and Curtis Mayfield, this, that, and the other. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Fire as well, just because the instrumentation is amazing. The instrumentation blew me away. Anderson .Paak on drums, Bruno Mars doesn't sing that much, but his production is pretty decent, and it's got the personnel on this. Is the list of personnel is huge, as you would sort of expect from a funk and soul album. Jack, where would you put this?
I'm not too mad about it, but
it doesn't matter now, really, does it?
Yeah. Well, if I say trash, I feel that pulls it down. I'm not gonna, but if I did,
you would average out.
It's.
You can't give this anything lower than a back pat. Like, come on.
It's a solid back pat album. I'm putting it in fire because of the. I've been outvoted, but like of the 9 tracks on this album, I might come back to 5, which is like 50-50. And when you're only putting out half an hour of music, if half of it is good, should you have made an EP instead?
Do you seriously doubt that anything is going to grow on you? Even the track with Thundercat. There was a track with Thundercat that none of us mentioned.
But where was he?
I think he played bass on it.
Yeah, but like he didn't play like Thundercat bass, did he?
No.
Like
no, there was a tiny solo towards the end.
Yeah,
which was tiny little fill.
Was the best part of the track.
True.
Like,
yeah.
If you're gonna have, do you know what I mean? Like, this is, for me, like, Bootsy Collins' job now is just narrating albums, which I'm fine with, and I feel like that he had just enough on this album. It wasn't overbearing. It was like just enough to keep giving it that vibe, and I think he does a great job. But if you've got someone like Thundercat coming onto an album, you let that man bass.
Yeah, he's literally he's a virtuoso on bass. Like that's like letting John Petrucci feature on your album. You just give him funk guitar.
Here's the power chords, John.
But I feel like if you let Thundercat be Thundercat, it would like take away from what they were trying to do with the album. You know?
But I feel like
if you let him out, like unleash completely.
If you take yeah. But I feel like there's. Let me get my framing right. I feel like there's two ways you can go. Yeah, this is no Thundercat. This is completely Thundercat. I feel like they went from here and they were like, that's enough. That's enough. Stay there. Where they should have gone. Okay, do what you want. Rein it in. That's the sweet spot. Like it wasn't enough of a, and that would have helped with the kind of all these tracks fall under the same umbrella sort of stuff that we touched on earlier. If you've got a feature on an album that's a bit samey, problem solved. Let them loose a bit. Let them off the leash.
Yeah, Thundercat on bass, Anderson .Paak on drums. Could have been legendary. Mr. Trick there.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I guess the thing with that, sorry, just to say, I guess the thing with that is it's a bit more troublesome when he's like quoted as a feature, like because he didn't play bass on all the tracks, right? No, exactly. So it probably would have been better if they enlisted him as the bassist. And again, he's played it fairly straight, but it wasn't listed as a feature because he's a feature that your expectations are a lot higher.
Make it a power trio.
Yeah,
a funk and soul power trio. Shit, I'd buy tickets to that. Thundercat, Anderson .Paak, and Bruno Mars. Damn, Mr. Trick there.
I'd be down.
Any final words, Jack?
I think this achieved about 70% of its potential. Just because I had such high hopes for it. It's worth a listen. Because it's so short, like why wouldn't you give it a go? But I think that in terms of what it could have been versus what it is, it's slightly underwhelming for me.
It's okay. My final thought is if you're on the fence, it's 0.3 of a Migos album in terms of listening time. So in terms of managing your time, there's an easy win.
There's some numbers for you. Jack enjoyed 60%, and it's 70% of its potential, and 0.3 of Amigos album. So sum all that together is an evening with Silk Sonic. Right. Thanks for listening.
Maths.
I've been Dennis. This is Jack and Hattie. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.